Hey, good morning. It's Michelle, and I am in my bed with a cat and a 7-year-old. So if you hear any background noise, that's what's going on there. I decided that I wanted you to have this video first thing in the morning, and decided that I wouldn't try to get myself ready and pretend like I looked like something different at this time in the morning. Um, so welcome to my real life. Um, I sent you your day one email already with 3 questions or 4 questions that I want you to consider as we start our process of discovering our values. Um, Before you settle in to look at those questions and um, write about them, I want you all to think about what it means to be in a beginner's mind, what it means to approach something um, from the perspective of being a beginner, of um, um, of being open and receptive. I think sometimes we go into projects or into these kinds of learning experiences with an idea of what we want the outcome to be, which is good, but for this first week, I want us really to just try to focus on just being okay not knowing, right? And as of today, we don't all know what values we're going to be working with at the end of this week. And so take a deep breath and count backwards if you need to from 10 to clear your mind and let yourself be a beginner. In fact, in all things, all week, maybe you can give yourself permission to be a beginner and have a beginner's mind. This week is about discovering what our values are, but I also would love for it to be about slowing down. And I'm always, in my work with women, and myself, I'm always amazed at how much a woman can learn about herself if she just slows down for a little bit. And um, so that's my hope for us this week, is that we can enter into a beginner's mind and be open and receptive and slower, because that's what's necessary in order to really hear ourselves. So I sent you 3 questions, as I said this morning, for you to start to consider this concept of values. My favorite definition of values comes from Brene Brown. She says a value is a way of being or believing that we hold most important. Being or believing, right? Um, the other thing I want you to know is that this concept of values-based living is not new. It's centuries old. As long as there have been codes of conduct, there have been people living by values. And it originally, in psychology, the notion of values became popular in the 1980s when this really great book was written called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Some of you might remember it. And then, of course, it was repopularized by Brene Brown in the last 10 years. And it was popular in my life about 10 years ago when shit hit the fan, which is usually how things become popular in my life when I'm in crisis. So, hold on, I have notes. Let me look at my notes. I guess one thing it's worth saying. That's okay, baby. Thank you. No, you don't have to read them, but I love you. Thank you. I think it's worth saying here on day one too, why? Like why is it important to live by our values? And well, there's a lot of research, right, that says that the most fulfilled people, the truest people, are the people who know what they stand for and can live by those values. And for me too, um, if any of you have ever been dancers, you you might know the concept of spotting. When you spin, you find a spot on the wall, and you keep your eyes planted on that spot so that as you're spinning, if you always come back to that spot, you won't get dizzy. And so for me, I like to think of values as that spot on the wall that I find when everything else is spinning, so that I don't get dizzy. there's this great story too, and I think it's sort of a cheesy story, but to me, it's one of the best metaphors for thinking about values. You know, there's this story about this professor who stands up in front of his classroom and he's got this big jar, and he puts inside of the jar these three big rocks, and the jar is full with these three big rocks, and he says to the class, you know, is this jar full? And the class unanimously agrees, yes, the jar is full for sure with these three big rocks. And then he pulls out a bag of gravel, and he pours the gravel into the jar, and the gravel fills up all the tiny little spaces around the rocks. And then he says to the class, now is the jar full? And unanimously, the class is like, yeah, absolutely. Now the jar is full. And then he pulls out a bag of sand, and he pours the sand into the jar of rocks and gravel, and the sand fills up every space where no light can even come through. And the professor says, now the jar is full. And so when you guys think about, as we're thinking about values this week, we're going to sort through a lot of words. And some of them are going to be sand, and some of them are going to be pebbles. The ones that we're looking for are the big rocks, right? All of it's important because, you know, one of the struggles I think we have sometimes when we're trying to discover values is we want to have, you know, 500, right? Like we're going to look at all these different words and they're all going to sound great and I want to live by all of them. And maybe you will and maybe you do, but maybe some of them are sand and maybe some of them are gravel. And the ones that we want to look for are the big rocks. So I hope that's helpful. Today, you have two objectives. Focus on having a beginner's mind, right? Letting yourself be new to this process, giving yourself permission not to know the answers today. And the other thing that we're going to focus on is those 4 questions I sent you for you to consider, and it's just kind of a warm up for us to start thinking about values. So, good morning. Have a great day. Remember, beginner. Be with your beginner's mind today and this week, and don't forget to breathe. And you'll hear from me again soon.